everyone, my name is Zoe Shyness. I'm a part of Group 1, and our topic is perception and miscomprehension or comprehension within sites. So, the first topic I decided to touch on is how we perceive messages based on font size. So, for this, I decided to create this advertisement that you see on the right hand side. Font size affects how people perceive a message through factors such as urgency, importance levels, memory retention, and comprehension speed. To create this ad, I used the AI chatbot of ChatGPT. I started by prompting it to create a product sale advertisement that utilized different font sizes to affect consumers' perception and comprehension. I gave it this base so it would understand the basics of me wanting a visual advertisement that would primarily focus on using a variety of font sizes to change how people perceive the message of the sale. After that prompt, it just spit out a bunch of pretty hollow sales encouragements for customers to engage in, and it gave me a big variety of sale percentages. So to refine the ad more, I asked it to make it more specific, and I asked it to assign a specific product like tech to each percentage it originally gave. I asked it to write in smaller text under each section what exactly was up to 80% off, what stuff has the buy one get one sale, and what items are an extra 25% off. After this tweak, I was much happier with the results and it was more direct. The final product utilizes a big font size with all capitalized letters and an exclamation point for the excitement. This is at the top of the page for the original notice of the sale. Below that, in the center field of the page, I had it use the figure ground theory to make the 80% text pop. It's a very round and whole number, as well as it's set front and center in the foreground. And it shows that the 80% is the most important and urgent message to be received. And it also helps with remembering that number once the image is taken away from the viewer's eyes. All the smaller text below is still placed there for the consumer to read if they want, but it's put at a lower urgency level, meaning their mind might skip over it. So if the brand wanted to put some restrictions, like restricting terms or conditions with the sale, they would probably want to put those in smaller text at the bottom of the page where the consumer's eye would catch it the least. Moving on to my second ad, I decided to look at the clarity versus confusion within visual messaging. So for the second advertisement, I kept the same concept of a sale promotion of a made-up brand. This one is selling home goods, and I wanted it to focus this one on more visual items since the last ad was all text with no pictures. I started by asking ChatGPT again to give me an advertisement for a company trying to sell items through big sales. And first it gave me an ad similar to the one on the last page, but except all text. Instead of it being all text, it added photos, but it was still pretty unorganized. I then asked it to calm down the colors to make them more relaxing rather than a hyper and urgent messaging tactic. I wanted the sale on this one to still be exciting, but not as stress-inducing or too bold or loud. I wanted it to be soft on the eyes and just enticing overall. So after I tweaked this, I asked it to make the setup more organized with sections, and I prompted it to put the text on the right side and the images on the left. By doing this, I was utilizing the theory of hemispheric lateralization. This is the concept of when the left side of your brain processes text and numbers, but you see it through your right eye, and that's why you understand it better when you see it on the right side of the page. And that's why I put the numbers on the right side. So for the opposite of that, on the other side, I put the pictures on the left because the right side of your brain receives pictures, but you use your left eye to see it. This way, I'm strategically placing the numbers and pictures on their correct side so that the brain has an easier time processing and comprehending the message. And here are my sources that I used for the first slide as well as the second slide.
This slide focuses on how color, specifically green, can influence how people feel and behave when they see an advertisement. In general, colors play a really big role in how we interpret ads, even if we don't consciously realize it. Certain colors can trigger emotions or associations pretty quickly, which can shape how someone feels about a product. For example, I focused on the color green. Green is commonly associated with things like sustainability, nature, and health. So when people see green in an ad, they're more likely to connect the product with being environmentally friendly or natural, even before they actually read anything. There's also research that supports this. One study by Feng and others in 2022 found that using green in advertisement can actually increase consumer preference for environmentally friendly products. It's not just design choice, it can directly influence how people make decisions. Looking at the ad that I created, everything is intentionally designed around that idea. The color palette that I used is used throughout the entire ad to reinforce the message of sustainability. The product itself, which is a reusable, sustainable water bottle, is something that already connects to environmental responsibility, and this color helps strengthen the association for people who view the ad. I also included visuals like plants and hands holding leaves, which adds to the natural and environmental feeling of the ad. The wording like live simply, waste less, and designed by nature, rooted in accountability, works together with the color to create a consistent message for environmentally friendly products. This ties into a couple of theories. One is color psychology, which explains how colors influence perception and behavior. The other is attitude formation, which is basically how people develop opinions or preferences based on what they see in advertisements. In this case, the color green helps create a more positive attitude towards the product. I made this using a Canva template, and then I used AI to generate the bottle images and icons just to make sure everything looked cohesive and realistic. Overall, the main idea is that color isn't just about making something look good. It actually plays a really big role in shaping how people think and feel about a product, and it can influence whether or not they buy it. For this slide, I am explaining the idea of cultural differences in how people interpret color, which is something that I really tried to focus on within my ad. When I was designing it, I didn't want to just pick colors that looked good. I wanted them to actually mean something. And one thing that I found was that colors don't mean the same thing everywhere. It really depends on the culture of that area. For example, blue in Western cultures is usually seen as calming or peaceful, but in some Middle Eastern cultures, it can be associated with sadness or sorrow. There's also gold, which is often associated with things like sacredness or royalty, especially in a lot of African and Asian cultures. Red is kind of the opposite depending on where you are. In many Eastern cultures, it represents luck, prosperity, and celebration. But in Western cultures, it can sometimes come across more like a warning or as danger. I also added different cultural symbols like the Eiffel Tower, the Parthenon, a Mayan pyramid, and the pagoda, just to represent different parts of the world. The idea was to kind of visually show that this ad is meant to connect across cultures, but it's also that people are going to interpret it differently depending on their background. For theory, I used selective perception, which is basically the idea that people see what they're used to seeing. So depending on someone's culture, they might focus on certain colors more or interpret them in a totally different way than someone who comes from a different background. There's also high involvement learning because this isn't just the kind of ad that you glance at and immediately get. It's supposed to make you think a little bit and actually process what the colors and symbols are that were added into the advertisement. Overall, the main goal was to show that color isn't just for design, it carries meaning, and that meaning can change a lot depending on who's looking at it.
In my slides, I decided to integrate multiple marketing color, contrast, and placement theories into my ads. To create these ads, I used Gemini AI. First is this energy drink ad, and then on the second slide, a lipstick ad. I first thought of what kind of product I could use to stand out behind a darker background to create contrast and catch the audience's attention and make them focus on my product. I asked Gemini to first create the ad and use bright colors such as pink in the drink ad and bold red in the lipstick ad. I then asked it to create a black and white background to make the product stand out and capture attention. I then continued on and asked it to use some placement theories such as rule of thirds, as well as make the drink or lipstick more prominent and larger on the ad. When creating these ads, I used the 7 ± 2 rule. Oftentimes ads have lots of clutter on them and can be visually overwhelming. I wanted these ads to be simple and to the point and not go over the sensory limit. The centered can or focused lipstick shot allow for the product to be the focus and make it clear and concise. I also included vividness into my ads. The bright color is unexpected and is different from the rest of the content in the ad, making it stand out. In my research while creating these ads, I learned a lot about colors. Colors are not just for aesthetic. They are psychological and always have meaning behind them. By using highly saturated colors, such as bright red and pink, on a dark background, it creates prominence and loudness, making it clear where the user should focus. These highly saturated colors also provoke emotions. Pinks are often associated with joy, excitement, and energy. And then here on this ad, red is often associated with boldness, confidence, and passion. These are the kind of feelings you want to feel when looking at a motivating energy drink ad or a confidence-building makeup ad. Using these colors for a singular product on a darker background allows you to know where your attention should lie and does not overwhelm you with multiple bright colors, words, and visuals. Another theory I included in my ads was figure ground theory. By using a darker background, I have made the figure or the product unmistakable and apparent. I also included placement theories such as centering with the words and rule of thirds. These placements are very visually appealing and are easy to look at. I also used proximity to help guide the eye on where to look and create an association between the lipstick and a woman's face. Proximity can also influence categorization. When vibrant colors such as pink and red are placed next to a bold statement or logo, the brain groups them together and transfers the emotions the colors provoke onto the brand. All of these things work together to create concreteness and avoid misconceptions. The ad is easy to picture and remember, avoiding any confusion and making sure it is a direct message. This makes it easier to remember and stick in someone's mind and be retrieved later on. These ads show choice architecture. Choice architecture is the intentional design in which something is presented to a customer in order to influence their decision making. When it comes to ads, sight is the heavy lifter of the senses. It is a primary filter we use to decide if something is worth brain power or if it is just typical outside noise. All of these theories used in the ads are a way to mindlessly nudge a person into feeling good while looking at the ad and hopefully retain their attention. By using choice architecture to guide the eye through color and layout, it goes beyond just exposure and actually makes it into the viewer's memory. All of these theories, when combined, make a very visually appealing, emotion-provoking, and easy to understand ad, which is exactly what you want when it comes to the sense of sight in marketing. And now here are my sources that I used to help guide me in this research.
This ad focuses on how texture and visual elements can be used to create a sense of luxury and influence consumer perception. To start with how I created the ad, I actually began by finding two separate images, one of a grilled cheese sandwich and one of tomato soup. I then put those two images into AI to generate a new combined image. From there, I focused on refining the visual to match the concept I had in mind. One of my main goals was to make this ad feel more elevated and luxurious, even though it's a very simple everyday meal. To do that, I specifically directed AI to adjust the background using darker tones for the table and the plate. I wanted the darker color palette because it's often associated with fine dining and upscale restaurants. I then continued altering the image until it matched the mood and aesthetic I was going for. Once I was satisfied with the image itself, I used AI again to help brainstorm a name for the restaurant that this meal could potentially be served at. I wanted the name to feel simple but still elevated and slightly luxurious. After choosing the name I liked best, I brought everything back into Canva and combined the image with the restaurant title to finalize the ad. In terms of design, I was really intentional about emphasizing texture because texture plays a huge role in how consumers interpret quality. The grilled cheese is a great example of this. The melted cheese stretch and the crispy golden brown brioche create a strong contrast that makes the food feel rich, indulgent, and more premium. It's not just about showing the product, but making it look like an experience. I also wanted to focus on the tomato soup. I wanted it to appear smooth and creamy, almost velvety, and add the steam helps communicate that it's fresh and hot. That warmth adds a sense of comfort, but also reinforces the idea of high quality. Something you'd get at a nice restaurant, than rather something you'd pick up that's basic. This connects directly to consumer psychology. Even though customers can't physically touch or taste the food, the visual textures still create a sensory experience. Research shows that texture acts as an unspoken language in marketing and helps build emotional connections with customers. So when someone actually looks at this ad, their brain actually starts to imagine what the food would feel like, the crunch of the bread, the softness of the cheese, or the warmth of the soup. This is also known as mental simulation, where people can almost experience the product without physically interacting with it. That was the big goal when I designed this, to make the viewer visualize themselves indulging in a high-quality, savory soup and sandwich. I wanted it to feel comforting, but also elevated and slightly luxurious. I also used other visual elements to support that. The dark background and lighting help create a more upscale restaurant-style atmosphere, and small details like the basil and parmesan add a gourmet touch. All of these elements work together to take something very simple like a grilled cheese and tomato soup and completely transform it into how it's perceived. Overall, this ad shows how brands can use texture and visual cues not just to display a product, but to create a full sensory experience that increases desire and makes the product feel more premium. This ad focuses on how perception and misconception are created through texture, color, and overall design choices. I tied this idea into what I like to call dew theory. Dew theory is the idea that a dewy, glossy appearance on skin signals hydration, health, and beauty, even if that visual doesn't fully reflect the actual performance of the product. It's based on the assumption that if skin looks dewy, it must be well moisturized and taken care of. To start with how I created this ad, I began by finding an image on Google of a woman with very clear, glowing skin. I wanted a strong visual that immediately communicates health and beauty. From there, I built the rest of the ad around this image. This is a made-up brand that I used AI to help brainstorm both the name and the overall concept. AI first generated a base image of skincare products, and then I continued refining it by adjusting the lighting, textures, and colors until I reached the final version. So instead of just using AI as is, I guided it based on the ideas I wanted to communicate. One of my main focuses was texture, which directly connects into dew theory. I emphasize dewy skin, water droplets, and smooth, creamy product textures because those are strongly associated with hydration and healthy skin. These elements make the product feel refreshing and high quality even before someone uses the product. I also chose specific colors very intentionally. I used greens, blues, and warm neutrals because they symbolize trust, positivity, and health. These colors help reinforce the idea that the product is safe, calming, and beneficial for the skin, which supports the overall message of Dew Theory. From a consumer psychology perspective, this ad works because it allows viewers to mentally simulate the experience. Even though they can't physically try the product, the textures and visuals help them imagine how it would feel on their skin, which builds an emotional connection and increases their desire. However, this is also where misconception comes into play. The level of glow and moisture shown in the ad is likely exaggerated. Just because the skin appears dewy doesn't necessarily mean the product delivers that level of hydration in real life. Dew Theory shows how consumers can associate appearance with effectiveness, even when that connection may not be fully accurate. Overall, this ad demonstrates how texture, color, and visual cues, especially through Dew Theory, can shape perception and influence expectations, even when those expectations may not fully match reality.